Hello, everyone who's come so far. We will just begin the webinar in just one more minute. We'll give one more minute for people to join, and then we'll begin. Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Boulanger. I serve as the Executive Director for the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. And thank you so much for joining us for this webinar today on IRMA's new draft standard for consultation. If you are joining and would like to listen in English or any other language we're offering today, then please go to the bottom of your screen and find the interpretation button, a round circle at the bottom of your screen, and you may choose the language that you would like to hear in of the choices that we're offering today. You can choose English, Chinese, Russian, Bahasa Indonesian. So please go to the bottom of your screen and choose the language you'd like to hear in today. And as we offer the webinar today, you may also type questions in throughout the webinar. Please feel free to add questions in the question and answer box, and we will strive to answer as many as possible during this webinar. And those we can't answer here, we will try to answer to you directly by email. It will be easiest if you type your questions in English, as our interpreters will be working to verbally interpret during this session and not able to rewrite questions that come in other languages. But if you type in another language, we will still try to respond to you by email that way. So we'll take your questions in any form, but we'll have to prioritize probably the questions that come in English today. So thank you again all for joining us today for the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance's webinar on our new public consultation to update the IRMA standard. So we're going to, in one brief hour, quickly go over, for those of you new to IRMA, what is IRMA and what is happening with the IRMA system. Why are we revising the IRMA standard for responsible mining? What is happening during this consultation time, and what are the draft documents that you may now review? We'll share with you some specifics on what are the changes in these documents, and how do you participate in the process of providing feedback to IRMA. We'll share with you how decisions will be made about how to update the IRMA standard, the transition period between the old version and the new, and then we'll take questions and answers with the time that we have remaining. For those of you who might have signed up for our second webinar, we have another one happening in just 8 hours from now at 2 p.m. London, 3 p.m. Paris, 4 p.m. Johannesburg. That webinar is the exact same as this one, just at a different time zone to try to be convenient for others. So if you are here today and you don't want to hear the same material, you don't need to join us again, but of course, everyone is welcome. So that next one is the same content. So the reason we're having this webinar today is that IRMA has just released 2 important draft standards for public comment. The first is the standard for responsible mining and mineral processing. Our second version, its proposed updates to the 2018 version, and also a draft chain of custody standard. This webinar is to provide you with insights on both of these documents and how you can participate, and to give time for questions that you might have. So in brief, what is the IRMA system? If you are new to IRMA, IRMA is both a standard that describes best practices at large-scale mine sites around the world, and it has been developed over 16 years now through a robust multi-stakeholder process that has engaged mining-affected communities, NGOs, labor unions, mining companies, their customers, their investors, academics, governments, international institutions, and others. And in their discussions and debates for more than a decade, the IRMA standard that came out in 2018 was created, and we are now updating this. In addition to the standard itself, IRMA is also a system for measuring achievement against that standard at mine sites and a set of rules and guidelines for how that measurement exists. It includes site visits on mine sites and input from rights holders, others in the communities, mine workers, and other stakeholders. We can go next slide. And the IRMA system is the world's most rigorous and detailed standard describing the expectations for more responsible mining. It is stronger currently than any country's laws, but it's not pass-fail. We use a scoring tool so mines can come in no matter where they are in their journey to greater environmental and social responsibility, benchmark where they are now, and show improvement over time. And we welcome mines and mining companies all around the world to come in and see the value of improving these practices. It can be used equally, whether the materials are lithium or nickel, gold or copper, iron ore. It's meant for a broad range of materials with just a few exceptions on those. The assessment of performance at mine sites is at the mine site, so you won't hear us talking about an IRMA achieving mining company, but companies can choose to put all of their sites into independent review and talk about their performance at each or collectively across these. And IRMA's system is equally governed. It is equally governed by 6 houses who serve as the IRMA board of directors and oversee all of the operations of IRMA to keep it accountable to all. The contents in the IRMA standard are not something that was just written new by the IRMA Secretariat or its board of directors. Rather, they have a foundational commitment to draw on the existing metrics for best practices globally, including the OECD due diligence guidance, the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, the International Labor Organization's conventions, the IFC performance standards, Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, and many more. So when you go through the IRMA standard, you will see it as an embodiment of many of these other existing standards. And that means for mining companies doing much of this work already, this gives you an opportunity to get credit for the work that you're already doing in this work. And for those of you who are working hard to bring attention to these existing metrics, we've worked hard to recognize and point to these best practices in the IRMA standard. Fundamental in IRMA is that we are not trading issues off of each other. So it's not how do we protect worker health and safety or clean water. It's not how do we protect indigenous rights or address the air quality for a community around a mine site, but rather it's a comprehensive measure of how a mining company performs and driving value for increased transparency on the impacts of industrial scale mining, and also value for improved practices. Industrialized societies use mined materials in the products we have every day. We are complicit in the impacts of these, and we want to draw increased transparency on those and value for mining companies to improve practices and for communities and workers to benefit from those improvements. In brief, I'll share again that it's not just the standard which sets the requirements, but just as important as how do you measure those requirements on the ground. In the IRMA system, the audits of mines are publicly announced. Anyone may participate in the audits and share their perspectives. There is a desk review process first, where auditors review a mining company's materials on how they believe they perform against the standard and the many documents that will support that. And then they do an on-site visit where they speak with workers, communities, and other stakeholders, including Indigenous rights holders. Mining companies are able to review a draft audit report for factual errors before it goes public. And then a detailed summary of the audit results are made public so that people can really understand the mining company's efforts and also commitments to improve over time. As I said, it's not pass-fail. IRMA uses a scoring tool where each chapter is scored, and then an overall achievement level can be shared as well. So IRMA transparency is where a mining company at any level shares their score. IRMA 50 or 75 are mining companies meeting 50% or 75% respectively in all 4 main areas of the IRMA standard, and at least substantially meeting all of the critical requirements as well. And IRMA 100, of course, is meeting all of these. As I said, IRMA's commitment here is to equal governance, is to creating value for every house in IRMA's governance by being valuable, credible, and useful to all. So this is the governing board of IRMA, 6 houses with 2 seats each. They are equal not only by each having 2 seats, but by having veto authority over each other. So if there are 2 no votes in any one of these 6 houses, that stops things, because the IRMA board of directors has agreed they will not leave a house behind. They are there to create value and confidence and increase trust for all, and that creates greater value for all together. So to bring you up to date on what's happening with IRMA before we shift to telling you what's in the new standard, you will see now governments and international institutions increasingly referencing IRMA as a guide for best practice, and this makes it all the more useful for the companies coming in who are also turning then to see what are the expectations of the legal structure, because a voluntary initiative like IRMA will never be as important nor replace the essential role of law in government. We hope to be a template and a support to governments and the rule setting they do for all operators. Increasingly, Indigenous rights advocates are referencing IRMA and their own sovereignty over Indigenous lands, including the critical nature of free, prior, informed consent. You see leading brands who are making cars or jewelry, the infrastructure for wind turbines or solar panels, electronics, household products, and more, using IRMA to support their due diligence as they understand their supply chain and work to reduce harm in the supply chain. The finance sector similarly using the IRMA standard to review their investments and increase environmental and social responsibility in their investments. Labor unions using the IRMA standard to train their members on worker health and safety and also labor rights. Affected communities, Indigenous rights holders, and NGO advocates referencing the IRMA standards and working with leading brands to ask for the same types of things from mining companies there and create value for those companies to meet those expectations. And mining companies similarly achieving greater value by meeting higher expectations, differentiating themselves from competitors who may not be making such commitments, and improving practices. With these commitments and the service that IRMA seeks to bring, there are now more than 100 mine sites owned by 78 different mining companies operating in 29 different countries, with more than 50 different mined materials formally registered and engaged. The first 16 independent audits in the audit system right now underway across South Africa, Senegal, Mozambique, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Argentina, Zimbabwe. We very much look forward to welcoming more mining companies in more countries and materials so that it can meet the demand increasingly of leading brands who are looking to do more responsible sourcing and communities looking to improve practices on the ground where they live and more equitable benefit sharing. And with this, I will turn now to what's happening with this revision to Michelle Smith.
Thank you, Amy. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're going through a revision right now. There's a few reasons that we're doing this. Probably our most important reason is that we want to ensure that the IRMA standard that is out there continues to incorporate the feedback from all of our sectors that we represent. We also want to make sure that the standard and the system that we have in place continues to result in positive outcomes that are aligned with our mission and our vision. That we're reflecting the latest science and the latest commitments that are occurring around the world. Many of those coming out of those programs that Amy mentioned earlier, whether it's the UN, IFC, UNESCO, and other organizations. We want to make sure that the standard continues to be clear and understandable and accessible to our stakeholders. And to this end, we've learned much from the first audits that were completed, and we are incorporating the feedback and learnings from that into this process. And then finally, we want to make sure that as the standard evolves, that we're continuing to stay up to date and address the most significant environmental and social issues. As an ISEAL member, IRMA is always looking to improve our system in order to match the expectations of ISEAL. We are following the good practice requirements that ISEAL has laid out in their standard setting code of good practice. And one of these requirements is that we review and update our standard at least every 5 years and include public consultation in that process. This helps us make sure that we're addressing stakeholder concerns, that we're addressing those best practices, and that we are improving the way in which the standard can be implemented. We started initially with a standard for responsible mining. And after that, we have come up with 2 additional draft standards, which were released for public consultation and which have been pilot tested by a number of organizations. The first of those is related to the front end of the mining life cycle, which is the exploration and development. And the second of those draft standards was related to mineral processing. We have in this draft standard merged these 3 standards together into one integrated standard. And so you will find as you review this draft that there are references to applicability throughout the standard to help users understand how to apply it, whether they're at the early stages of mining or in the operating phase, or if they're focused on processing of minerals. In this process, we've also worked hard to ensure that what we are doing is meeting the expectations for supply chain due diligence. So by bringing this standard together, beginning with the earliest phases of mining at the exploration and development phase, through operations and through mineral processing, and bundling those together in a standard, we've also brought in a second standard, which is the chain of custody standard. And that standard is, along with the others, is helping to feed the due diligence process for responsible supply chains. Purchasers are very interested right now in making sure that they're responsibly sourcing their raw materials, and they want to be able to track all the links and stages in the mineral supply chain to make sure that they've all been managed responsibly. So between the new integrated standard covering the phases of mining and the chain of custody standard, we're addressing that need. And Pierre, I will hand that over to you. Oh no, Amy, I think I'm handing it back to you.
That's right. Thanks, Michelle. And I should have said that Michelle Smith is our assurance director. Michelle has served over the last year as both the Director of Standards and Assurance, and so is a great resource on both. But now the job has become bigger as more and more mining companies are coming in and doing the auditing. So she is focusing in particular on auditing and assurance. And I will turn in a moment to Pierre, who is our new Director of Standards, to share with you a bit more what's there. But just to say a little bit about what you're reading, what it is and what it's not. So first and foremost, it is not approved by our board of directors. What you are reading is not a final document. We are inviting you to the table of the conversation on what should the IRMA standard for responsible mining and mineral processing say. So what you are reading is a work in progress, and you are invited to help the IRMA board of directors decide what this updated version of the standard should say. So in reading, you will see at the beginning of each chapter notes on what are the issues, what's the feedback we've heard, what are the challenges, what are the differences of opinion, what problems are we trying to solve for, and you will see even specific questions that we bring to you, each of you as the experts, whether you're an expert on all of the topics in the IRMA standard or only particular chapters that are most important to you. We're really inviting you to help us know how to update and revise this standard. For those of you who prefer to read this content in an Excel version, we have that available for you, and also an Excel version for the IRMA exploration and development stages, so you can know which requirements fit for that stage, and also help comment on that as well. Again, you'll see at the beginning of the IRMA standard here that this is shared in its current form, so you can participate in this process. So as you read here, you are not reading a final document, but you are absolutely invited to help us create that final document and guide the IRMA board of directors in making a decision they will make after this comment period ends, including possibly and most likely another comment period ahead for the substantial revisions that will be made before it will be adopted as final sometime in 2024. The input that is already in this document, though, that we're bringing back to you is based on information from these first dozen audits that have happened in the IRMA system already, from reviewing other standards and learning from our colleagues in the standard setting space, from increased public awareness and changing expectations in the world on key issues, as Pierre will share with you more, reviewing emerging issues that are gaining international discussion and making sure the IRMA standard accurately stays pace with what are best practices. A lot of the world has changed in the 5 years since the 2018 version of the standard came out. We've already received comments from many of you on IRMA Ready, the draft standard for exploration and development, and on the mineral processing draft that was already out. So this is updated and integrated already from those first drafts of both of those standards. It's ongoing input on particular issues and auditors' input to us, and expert working groups who've already helped to inform some of this. So when you read through these questions that we have for each of you and the notes that are here, there's a lot of work that's already gone into this, and yet we're still turning to you, asking you to help us bring the 2024 version of the standard forward. So what are these proposed changes? With this, I will turn over to IRMA's Standard Director, Piero Pasquale.
Thank you very much, Amy. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's really nice to have so many participants in today's webinar. So the proposed changes to the standard, and there are limits to what one can say in such a short period of time. But what I want to point out first is there are a number of changes in this new integrated draft standard that are structural. So it's more about the format and the style than the substance. And because we have integrated the 3 standards together, as explained earlier, to cover the mine life cycle from exploration to mining to mineral processing, we had to change a number of terms to allow for different entities and different projects and setups to be relevant. We also have reorganized a little bit the content between chapters that were similar. Whenever we had a structure such as, conducting a risk assessment, developing a management plan, tracking your performance on the outcomes and outputs of this management plan, we have made the language also more consistent. We've added more clarity when there were multiple sub-requirements within a requirement to make it clear for the mining companies operating the sites, or the exploration company, or the mineral processing companies, and also for the auditors. We have filled some gaps where certain elements were perhaps too implicit or were not aligned with other chapters with a similar structure. We've tried to bring in more consistency on terminology and criteria, again, that were similar from one chapter to another. And finally, we've removed the language that used to refer to new mines on the one hand versus existing mines on the other hand. So in the new draft that we've put out, you won't find this anymore, as it made inconsistent difference between sites, only based on their starting date. In terms of substance now, we have some brand new chapters that we're proposing, 4 of them. So the first one is gender equality and gender protections. And if you are familiar with the 2018 IRMA standard, you would know that gender issues, gender inequality was already addressed in the standard throughout the different chapters, but there wasn't a one dedicated chapter on gender equality and gender protections. So while strengthening this issue, we've also made it more visible, and there is a new chapter. 3 other chapters also are proposed to be added on the physical stability, one on land and soil management, and one on mineral supply chain and responsible sourcing, which is coming from largely the draft standard for responsible mineral processing that was put out in 2021. There are 2 chapters that don't have dedicated headlines anymore, but have been consolidated, cyanide and mercury management. And they're now integrated into existing environmental management chapters, also to avoid overlap, repetition, and inconsistency. And also to remind you that I see that there are already some questions coming in. Feel free to use the Q&A function of Zoom to put your questions. We will have time at the end to address these questions. So again, following on the substance of the changes, I am not going to cover everything. And as Amy explained, we've really tried hard to be very clear and transparent and didactical and user-friendly in the draft documents that we have published, to highlight the changes, the reason why, the conundrums, the questions that we're still, would really like to have input and comments on. But I would like to highlight just a few examples across the principles to show you the variety and the kind of range of changes that we're proposing. So within the business integrity principle, 2 examples under the stakeholder engagement and community engagement, there used to be a number of requirements where public interest information needed to be available upon request. So the auditors needed to verify and assure this. Now we've turned them into a requirement for companies and operations to actively inform their stakeholders that the information is not only available, but accessible. It's there, you know where it is, you know how to access and request and obtain the information. I've also highlighted the gender equality and gender protection chapter. As I said, this is a brand new chapter, and here we've tried to be comprehensive and cover a range of issues, from having a policy in place to conducting risk assessment, opportunity assessment, developing and implementing management plans, ensuring that there is monitoring and transparent reporting on progress. On the second principle, planning for positive legacies, again, a few examples here on indigenous peoples and free, prior, and informed consent. And if you look at the slide show afterwards, and we'll make it available, all these changes here, where it is in italic, these are, minor language clarification. But here it was important to add more clarification on free, prior, and informed consent, as this is such a critical and crucial issue, and also on remedy agreements and the need for communities, indigenous peoples groups, indigenous landowners and right holders to approve these kind of agreements. Also in the bottom right corner, under planning and financing reclamation and closure, we have added clarification, and we're proposing a number of pathways or avenues to clarify for mining companies and mining operations what to do when there isn't a government overseen financial assurance mechanism, as this can be a problem. On the social responsibility, again, you will have access to the slides, and all of this is transparent and detailed in the draft. But under occupational health and safety, which has been really, I think, at one of the top priorities across the mining sector for a very long time, we've added 16 more requirements. It's one of the most substantial expansion here in the draft standard. But we've added more requirements to reflect the fact that the International Labour Organization conventions last year passed a resolution to include a safe and healthy working environment as its fifth main principle of rights. And so we have elaborated on the requirements and the recommendations and the statements that goes with this resolution to make sure we strengthen a range of policy requirements, accountability at the senior management level, how do you manage contractor, a number of reporting, training, procedures and requirements as well. And still under social and responsibility, another chapter that I want to point out here is the conflict affected and high risk area due diligence, where we are also proposing some substantial revision and changes to better align this chapter with the OECD due diligence guidance for responsible supply chains of minerals in conflict affected and high risk areas, as this has been recognized and considered as one of the most advanced and practical standard or norm out there. And also we're seeking comments, input, suggestions, and guidance on these chapters. Finally, on the fourth principle of these integrated new draft IRMA standard, under environmental responsibility, a number of changes here with two brand new chapters, as mentioned before, on land and soil management, which is largely mapped to the water management chapter, but applied to land management and soil management, and taken from the mineral processing draft. The management of physical stability is also brand new, and we've reorganized a little bit how we address tailings and waste rock, as they used to be really the core of the waste and materials management. but now this chapter also cover all types of waste, whether hazardous, non-hazardous, and also cover a broader range of hazardous or dangerous materials beyond tailings. And a very important chapter also that I wanted to highlight, and that you will again find the detail in the PDF version, which is available in English and Spanish, under greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption. And as you would know, a lot has happened over the last 5 years in this space. And so it was also very important for IRMA to strengthen, revise, develop a number of new requirements, in particular around emission reduction, energy reduction targets, renewable energy targets, making sure that scope 3 emissions are covered, as they are the largest part of at most site and mining entity of their contribution to global warming, third-party verification, reporting, etc. So this was for the integrated standard that covers exploration, development, mining, processing. Regarding the chain of custody standard, as explained earlier, we released a draft version in 2020 for public review and comment. And so the new version, the draft version 2 that we've put out for public comment, responds to these comments that we received in 2020. The main changes are the addition of 2 new accounting models, control blending and book and claim, to better align with the practical realities of what we've seen, and also how institutions or organizations like ISO normalize or recommend responsible supply chains. We've expanded the guidance there, including with a number of practical, tangible examples of supply chains taken from the examples we've had in the IRMA system. So how to participate? The consultation period is open for 3 months, so until the end of January. There are many ways to participate. All the comments will be considered and taken into account equally, and they'll be included in a public summary. If you want your comments to be treated confidentially so that we don't disclose or publish your name or affiliation, this is absolutely fine. You just need to make this clear in your contribution. There are different ways, as I said, to contribute. One is a dedicated online platform you can find at responsiblemining.net/comments2. We've tried to make it as user-friendly and intuitive as possible. It doesn't cover the chain of custody standard at the moment, but you can access every single chapter of the new draft and leave comment on every single requirement, and also address some of the consultation questions that are there if you want. And you can also upload, if you'd rather send a generic, high-level or condensed contribution via PDF, you can also do it through the platform. Otherwise, you're always welcome to send your contribution via email to the comments@responsiblemining.net email address. You can also use WhatsApp to send text or voice contribution. And alternatively, you can use the post to send your comments to the IRMA office. And then one last thing I want to highlight here around the working groups. And I think there may be some of the working group members on this call. So to date, IRMA and over its decades of existence has convened a number of working groups to help inform particularly challenging chapters. We've had 10 to date, with more than 140 external experts contributing from all stakeholder groups. So I wanted to thank them again. The draft standard that we've put out has not been approved or signed off by the working groups, as they were not asked to come to a consensus. but we've really tried to incorporate all their comments, feedback, and suggestions. And it's likely actually that we're going to need to reconvene a number of working groups, and we will need more exchange. We have highlighted already some working groups in the draft where we're seeking active participation. And so volunteers are welcome, everybody's welcome. And it's very important for us to make sure that this isn't just group thinking, but that civil society is working alongside the corporate sector, academic experts, topic experts, and all categories of stakeholders here. And now I'll turn back to Amy to tell you more about the decision-making process.
Thanks so much, Pierre. And thank you again to the many working group members who've helped get the content ready for broad global public review. So how will decisions be made going forward? Ultimately, the next version of the IRMA standard must be approved by IRMA's multi-stakeholder board of directors. They will be making a decision ultimately that considers the views of all stakeholders and Indigenous rights holders. They will follow a clear and comprehensive public consultation process. As Michelle shared earlier, we have the ISEAL codes in front of us, guiding us forward, including looking at the issues of us being intentional, as ISEAL asks community members and full code compliant members to be intentional about who do you hope to reach, recognizing who is not in the room. So it's not just about who comments most, but it's really ensuring that we understand the full range of perspectives of those impacted by this work, and that the next draft of the standard stays in line with IRMA's mission and vision to create value for all and to create trust and confidence for all users of this. So I really want to emphasize again, we really want to hear from all of you and really ensure that we understand the differences in how the IRMA standard might be interpreted in different places in the world, different materials mined, different sizes of mines, and how can we make it more accessible and useful for each of you to use. As we make these next steps forward, as Pierre said, this is a 90-day public review period. During that time, the responsible sourcing chapter, which is closely linked with the conflict affected and high risk area chapters, I have a working group working on them right now to address the needs of the responsible sourcing chapter, which is particularly relevant for mineral processing. That chapter itself has been held back, and so it will come out and have at least 60 days for you to look at that chapter that's missing from the broader draft. But we expect that the feedback that you send in on this consultation draft will be substantive. It will change substantive things in this draft, and that means it will need another round of public review before it becomes final again. So we expect this to go into early to mid 2024, and that the process of having a finalized new standard will be by mid 2024, and then new guidance for mining companies who are applying it, for auditors who will be auditing it, for civil society and labor who are reviewing it, and how they use it to be available then after that time. And of course, all these changes mean that we very much need a transition period. So those of you who are already involved don't feel that suddenly the gears are grinding and things are changing. And so Michelle is going to share with you a bit on that. And before she does, I'll just remind everyone again, please use the chat. We've got 3 questions in already, which we'll be answering live in just a moment. We'll share with you the answers to those, but please go ahead and keep adding questions to the Q&A section. Michelle.
Thank you. So there's 2 components that we are looking at as we think about transitioning from the existing standard to the future final standard that will be revised. The first part of that is the timing of it for participating sites and then new sites. And then the second part of that is really looking at the mechanics of the process and how we'll be supporting that. So just looking at the timing, once the final standard has been finalized and adopted and is effective, this is going to be the trigger date for our transition period. Sites that are already engaged in the process will be able to choose to continue with version 1 for a period of time, or they can transition immediately, timed with their next audit, to version 2 if that works best for them. We will be asking new participants that come in to start their auditing process against version 2. And then any audits that are in play at the time that that transition period starts will have to be completed within a time frame, which we will be determining and then publishing at a later date. After that transition period, all audits will then use the second version. And we'll be identifying versions going forward on verification statements for each individual mine so that it's clear which version sites were audited against for which audit. In terms of the tools that we use, IRMA has many tools and things that rely on the content of the standard. And we are in the process of updating those in the background as public comment is going on. So we'll be, updating guidance documents. We will have a crosswalk document, something that essentially points to the original one and where you can find similar material in the new one. There will be guidance notes associated with that. We have a tool that we use to manage the self-assessment process and then tracking audit findings through that, referred to as the Mine Measure tool. The data that is contained in the Mine Measure tool will be migrated from version 1 to version 2. We'll also be conducting training sessions to help our auditing teams, to help participating sites, and then others who are interested in understanding how to convert from one to the other. And then we'll have stakeholder information sessions where the public will generally be invited to also understand what that process looks like. We've had a few questions come up that are related to the assurance process that I'm going to answer first, and then we'll move into questions that are actually related specifically to the standard itself. The first question we got was, has IRMA extended the list of accredited auditors? And we opened up the process to additional audit firms beyond the 2 currently approved firms this summer in June. And we continue to receive interest from audit firms and applications. So we are looking forward to expanding our list of approved audit firms. The second question that we got was, when will the auditing guidance be available for 2.0? As I mentioned, we are working in the background during this public comment period to prepare those additional support documents, including the auditor guidance. So that is going to be developed as we wait for comments, and then obviously it will be updated as need be as things change. The third question we got was, will IRMA design API software so that companies can streamline their IRMA reporting with other standards and framework? And yes, the answer to that question is, we understand that there is a real opportunity here for us to look at our reporting of data and come up with other ways that are efficient and effective and really focused on the user experience. So in 2024, we will be looking at our technology options for that. And now I am going to hand it over to our team to continue to answer questions.
So I can see one question in here, which is about, should a company wait for the next version to be out, given this time now? Should you get involved now? I would encourage companies to go ahead and get involved now, use the IRMA standard as it is right now. We'll create these flexible places as the new one comes out for you to make a choice. If you'd like to, as Michelle said, there's a crosswalk that can sort of, if there are particular issues that you find particularly relevant there where you'd like to update, we'll create easy ways for you, if you're already using the existing standard, to add these added expectations in it. But I would not wait right now. I would get in part because any of you who have known IRMA for a long time know that we take our time doing things. The updated standard will only be done when we get to a sense of comfort and confidence from all stakeholder sectors. So rather than waiting for it and knowing that leading brands are asking their suppliers now to do these audits, I'd encourage you to come in now and engage early now, and so you don't need to wait.
We have another question. How long is the transition period expected to take? 12 months, 18 months?
We haven't decided yet what that transition period will be. It will be approved by our board, but it will be, enough time that sites won't feel crunched in order to make this transition.
That's right. We expect that it will be a year, and we'll work to make sure that companies who are already involved don't feel like there's a grinding gears and you're being asked to move over to another, that it's set up to make sense to work for you all that have come in.
And I failed to mention too that just as this standard is going through a revision process, our assurance process will also be going through revision, and we will be putting that out for public comment in 2024 also.
And there's some, go ahead, Alan.
We have another question. How does the standard align with national and EU regulation?
This is a good one.
Pierre, would you like to
give
do
it a
it,
go.
Pierre? Please.
Yeah, so as mentioned during the presentation, IRMA has always tried, and I think did its best to align with existing norms, standards, references, regulations. Throughout the standard and in this new draft version, you will find a number of notes and references, citations when the alignment is clear. One thing that we would like to improve in the future is to make this even more explicit and have some more explicit references where a requirement or a chapter aligns with or references existing regulation. So these new regulations are well taken into account, and we'll still be reviewing them as we work out all your comments towards the final version.
I can see a very specific question that's in here as well that we will take right into the comments right off and put Pierre and Michelle on thinking. That is about grievance and how different grievance related requirements are in both a chapter focused on this topic, but then on particular issues in different chapters, and can they be streamlined? And I think basically it's asking so a company isn't penalized more than once for something being missing, for the same thing being missing. So I think it's a really interesting question, and how do we consolidate those expectations around grievance systems that companies have? So we'll take that right in. I don't know if Pierre or Michelle, if you have anything, I'll let you speak to that specifically, but otherwise I think it's detailed enough that we should sit down and look at the particular requirements. And we welcome that questioner to bring us a little more specifically on where you see the overlaps.
Well, perhaps on this point, just one thing to say, and something we've heard from mining companies, that one shouldn't try to look at the standard criteria by criteria and check one after another. This is almost impossible, but rather think of it as a system and have a sort of bigger picture view, overall view of the different requirements to revise, assess, strengthen, confirm the processes and management plans you have in place. So clearly, except in, I think, 1 or 2 particular instances, you don't need a one standalone dedicated mechanism or system to address every single criteria. You can have multiple criteria answered or evidenced with the same evidence or system in place.
We had a question specific to exploration and development. Do we recommend they continue to work with the draft IRMA Ready standard? It's wonderful if you've been working with it. If you now look at the consultation draft that's come out, it's taken feedback that's already come in on that draft and sought to improve it further. So we'd encourage you to look now at the current consultation draft, and you'll find also a Excel spreadsheet on which requirements apply to exploration and development and which specific phases. So I think it would be wonderful for you to switch over to this new one now, because hopefully you'll already find improvements in this document compared to that early IRMA Ready version. Let's see.
We have another question. Is it possible for Russian companies to join working groups?
Great question. I think that I'm looking across at Pierre as well. I think that we have to make sure that we're respectful of sanctions and international guidance on this. And otherwise, I think we would enjoy having all participants who might use the IRMA standard going forward to join working groups to provide comment in on improving the standard. The Russian context is incredibly important nickel producer right now in a world that's producing materials that go to climate transition. So I think we'd like to engage insights while still respecting international guidance as well. Pierre, Michelle, please feel free to edit me on any aspect of that.
No, this is absolutely fine. And again, we really want to have the most diverse and I think relevant and working groups working on these issues. And I see there are a number of questions / suggestions already in the Q&A function regarding landscape management, responsible sourcing, and we're taking notes of them, but again, to invite you, Ridaya, Emmanuel, to submit these comments either through the online platform or via email, so that we can formally integrate them, and you can also perhaps elaborate more or offer your views on it. It would be very, very helpful.
And please know we will take all of the comments that you're putting in the chat right now as comments, but at times 1 or 2 sentences, of course, it's hard to be sure that we're getting your meaning behind it. With a great question in here on tax rates as well, but I'm not sure we're getting it all with the small space you have. So please add more to the suggestions you're making just to make sure we get your correct meaning. And someone also asked about the timing for application of the standard to standalone mineral processing, refineries, smelters, etc. And that will be once the standard is finalized and we have auditors trained on it. So we expect that to be late next year, because we're expecting that the standard will be finalized mid-2024, and then we have to have auditors trained. But we highly encourage you to pick up the consultation draft and begin to use it as a guideline. You'll definitely get the sense of where we're going with it. So as you're preparing for independent review, this is your moment where you can use it as a guideline to be ready and to improve practices on the ground right now. And I think with that, we've answered most of the questions here, and we are at top of hour. So looking ahead, watch in coming weeks, we will be hosting a set of webinars on particular topics or for particular audiences. If there's anything of interest to you in particular that you'd like to see us go deeper in, please feel free to drop us an email and ask for that, because we can set up smaller group discussions, one-on-ones, and also webinars on topics that quite a number of people would be interested in. And thank you so much for your interest to join us today. And we really look forward to hearing your comments on how we can improve the IRMA standard for responsible mining and mineral processing and the chain of custody standard to work well for all of you.
Thank you.